Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's an honor to speak again in the House about this issue. And C3 has been before the House a number of times already, and so here we are talking about it again. And one of the big reasons why we are talking about this comes back to the fact that the immigration system has been messed up by the Liberals over the last 10 years. And in this bill in particular, we are talking about the value of citizenship and how this bill actually devalues citizenship. And so I wanted to chat this morning about that and how we are struggling with the way that the immigration system has been broken by the Liberal government. And I would remind people here, and I think we're all aware, we're going to be seeing a budget later today, which will also give out the immigration levels plan. And so we're all very curious to see if there's any hope of restoring any faith in our immigration system. And I guess we'll see that later today, potentially. So on this bill, of course, it all started because there was a lower court ruling that the existing second-generation limit was not proper. And so the core problem here is that this Liberal government chose to not appeal that ruling and instead just accepted the ruling as it was. And it really reflects, in my view, something that we've seen many times from this government, which is rather than actually putting forth legislation and exerting Parliament's influence and power in this country to make laws and make the laws that people want, this government tends to just rely on what the courts say. What does the court say? We'll just accept that. And that's what happened here. A lower court made a ruling. I didn't agree with it, and I think there was the federal government had every right to appeal that ruling and clarify it and try to get something that was more in line with what Canadians want. And we see that all the time. For example, in C12, which is also before the House right now, the government has had many warnings that the powers that they are putting in C12 are likely to be challenged constitutionally and likely to fail. And yet this government doesn't want to promote legislation that will be good and ultimately pass. Instead, they are just throwing it to the courts and letting the courts tell them what to do. And I just think that's completely wrong. And so what we as a committee attempted to do was to try to clean this up a little bit, because this bill is really about chain migration. It's about people who are not born in Canada getting citizenship, having children who are not born in Canada, never even living in Canada, but having a very loose connection to Canada, and then passing on that citizenship to generation after generation after generation. We took that and tweaked it a little bit and tried to make it a bit better, and that's what came back to the House. That was defeated by the NDP and the Liberal government, the NDP Liberal coalition that still seems to be alive and well. And so now here we are back to the original text of the bill, which in my view is not good. The reason I don't think it's good is because in the bill that we're debating here today, the original text of this bill, we are handing out citizenship and we are lowering the value of citizenship. We are creating a situation of chain migration. We are not ensuring that people that attain citizenship through this method can speak one of the languages, that they are not criminals, some basic things. And we always hear, the Liberals have said, well, this isn't about that, it's about automatically getting citizenship. Well, the reality is that what they've proposed has a condition, and that condition is you have to have spent time in Canada as a parent, 1,095 days before the birth of the child. So there's a condition there. So it's not automatic citizenship. You aren't deemed to be a citizen automatically. If a parent not born in Canada has a child not born in Canada, that child is not automatically a citizen under this new legislation. There's a condition there. That condition is that it has to be at least 1,095 days. So what we proposed is tightening those conditions even further to make it 1,095 days, which is 3 years, by the way, within a 5-year period, which shows a substantial connection to Canada. If you've spent 3 out of 5 years in Canada, that's a substantial connection. We also want to make sure that an older person coming into the country actually speaks the language, one of the 2 languages, and is not a criminal. And understands what it means to be Canadian. These are not unreasonable requests. These are not unreasonable things. And they're just further conditions to the one that the Liberal government has already proposed. And the other thing that I find quite telling is that we wanted to add in we proposed and passed at committee with the help of the Bloc the requirement for the government to report to Parliament the number of citizens created by this method. And of course the government refused to do that. They are not at all into transparency. They don't want anything that's done by them to be known by Canadians. And so as a result, when this amended report or bill came back to the House, the government with the help of the NDP undid those changes. And so here we are with devalued citizenship again. You know, citizens of convenience, people that realize they don't live in Canada, but oh, through this loophole, I can actually claim citizenship because my parents spent a random 1,095 days in Canada. These are going to create future problems for future governments, for future ministers, and for the people of Canada in the future. It just further makes sure that Canada's immigration system remains a joke. And Madam Speaker, I see that you're new here, and I've neglected to mention that I am going to be splitting my time. Yes, I know, silly me. With the member from Elgin, St. Thomas, London South. So, that leads me to our broken immigration system. Madam Speaker, we have a broken system in Canada. I know the Liberals don't like to talk about Canada as being broken because it just reveals everything that they have done to our country in the last 10 years. But by any objective measure, any measure at all, Canada's immigration system is a mess. In fact, it's become a bit of a joke in the world, and it's an embarrassment, to be frank. Asylum system is one good example. We had this infamous tweet that's been mentioned many times by Justin Trudeau that said, "Welcome to Canada." And of course, that started an avalanche of people coming into our country, wanting to get into our country through Roxham Road is a good example, where not using normal processes, not using the same system that every other newcomer to our country has followed. And by the way, the people that I talk to that are most upset about this system are the actual newcomers who used the system the way it was intended to be used, who waited the time that they had to wait, who filled out the paperwork that they had to fill out, as opposed to those who came into our country through a backdoor system. And of course, the government in their infinite wisdom not only endorsed this method, but built infrastructure and instructed the police to welcome people. You know, it's such a strange thing to say, sorry, you can't cross here, but welcome to Canada, and help them carry their bags in. It just was ridiculous. And ultimately, that is part of our broken system. The other thing I want to highlight is our what's called humanitarian and compassionate category. Certainly it's important for us to focus newcomers in our country on skills and requirements that we have in our country, so that the newcomers that come here not only are able to work and succeed, but they actually add great value to our country. And that's been the history of immigration in Canada for years and years and years. That is not happening right now. But there is one category that we should always try to do, and that is to help people when we can. And we can only help so much, but we still should be doing that. And so there have been cases with Ukrainians, for example, with Hong Kongers, who have been invited to come to our country. They are now here, and now the government is not providing a way for them to actually become citizens. It's really quite ridiculous. And so we end up with wait times. And this is you can go and see it on the website. It's hard to believe, but it's true. It actually says 10 plus years of wait time for some of these categories. And in the briefing notes that were given to the immigration minister when she became minister in spring, it said in some cases over 50 years, which is absolutely ridiculous. It just further proves how broken our system is. Which brings me to today, which is Budget Day, and we're going to hear about the Levels Plan, which tells how many people the government intends to let into this country. And you know, one thing I always want to point out, with this legislation, we've asked numerous times, and the government is unable to provide a number of people that will become citizens through this legislation. They defer the question, they don't seem to know, which does not give me much confidence that they actually know what they're doing, because they should have they have a lot of people working for them, as we know. Hundreds of thousands of people working for this government, and yet they cannot figure out how many people are impacted by this. In the last year's Levels Plan, one thing that I want to note is it showed that our non-permanent resident, temporary resident population was going to come down to 5% in 2026. So I'm very curious to see how that number is reflected today. Are we going to hit the 5% number for 2026? I would remind the government 2026 is in a couple months from now. So I think we're well over 7% now. So it seems like the plans made a year ago are probably not going to happen if I was a gambling man. So just kind of curious about what we're going to see from that. I'm also very curious to see how we're going to see spending come in at a generational level, as the government likes to say. To me, that's generational debt. We are giving generational debt to our children. So, Madam Speaker, this system is broken. This bill devalues the value of citizenship. It creates a chain migration system that I believe is wrong. I would encourage people in the House to vote against this. This is not something that helps our country, and the government could have done a far better job creating legislation that would stand up to the courts, that would protect Canadians and restore and protect the value of citizenship. Thank you.
Questions and comments. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House.
Yes, Madam Speaker, I'll shortly be able to provide a lot of details in terms of the content of the bill, but I want to ask a question specifically with respect to when the member makes reference to temporary workers. We have the leader of the Conservative Party who is saying that he's going to get rid of the temporary worker program. He's saying that we should not be renewing temporary workers. And then I just heard the member across the way comment in regards to people that have come from Ukraine. Does the member not realize that the people that are here from Ukraine, tens of thousands of them, actually are here with working permits? They need to be extended. If they're not extended, then there will be an obligation for them to leave. Does he believe the government should not listen to his leader and allow for an extension of people from Ukraine that are here under working permits?
Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, and so much to talk about in that question. I'll talk about the Ukrainian people, and I would frame it back this way. Right now, imagine if that member had a temporary permit to work in Canada and was worried about the fact that it was going to expire in, let's say, 2 months from now. And this government is not very good at renewing permits. If anyone who's worked in the system knows this. And so you're telling these people that you can be here and you have a temporary permit and trust us, we'll get the permit renewed. It doesn't happen in a timely manner. These people are living with stress. There needs to be a better solution than just throwing them into Canada and allowing them to fend for themselves without giving them the proper documentation. This is the problem with this government, is the lack of ability to create a system that actually works for the people who are here and that benefits them and benefits all of Canada.
The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech, and we saw good collaboration to move amendments at committee that would have improved this bill, and I'd like to remind him of that. The Bloc Québécois, the Conservatives worked together on these amendments when it came to, for example, the issue of language, of being able to speak in French or in English, having knowledge of Canada before becoming a citizen, or undergoing a security assessment. So once again, Madam Speaker, those three amendments were really important. And how does my colleague explain that those were rejected by the Liberals and the NDP, those three amendments which were good amendments?
Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the member for that great question. She's absolutely correct. The Bloc member, the members at our committee were very cooperative and helpful with creating, I think, good amendments, particularly around the issues of language and knowledge of Canada. And this was the work of the committee. This is the work given by this House, delegated to the committee to do. And the Bloc members had very good responses and reasons for why we want to protect language. And of course, we want to make sure that those in our country understand one of our two official languages, be it English or French. And that's so critical to making sure that we are able to put a value on citizenship, that we're able to define what it means to be Canadian and define what Canadian values are. And language is probably the core to that issue. And so it's very sad when I see that this Liberal government just throw language away and not make it part of this and not consider it to be important.
Member for Flamenburg, Glenbrook, Brent.
Thank you to my colleague who serves on the committee, and to amplify the question asked by the colleague from the Bloc. I mean, there were obviously very common sense amendments proposed by the Conservatives in conjunction with the Bloc Québécois that upheld the value of Canadian citizenship, that looked at language, the ability to speak the two founding languages of the country, and many other things. And yet those were blocked by the Liberal government. And so maybe, why do you think that is? Why is there this resistance to uphold the value of Canadian citizenship when we should be doing that with a piece of legislation like this?
Honourable Member for Saskatoon West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to my colleague for that question. You know, I think his question points to a broader problem on the other side of the aisle in the government, and that is just a lack of creativity, a lack of the ability to create good legislation. And that stems, you can see that in this legislation. This is a carbon copy of Bill C-71 from the previous Parliament, which was a carbon copy of the highly modified Senate bill that came to this House prior to that. There was not one bit of difference between C-71 from the last Parliament and C-3 in this Parliament. There was no thought put into it. The new minister just took it and ran with it. There was no consideration of some of the limitations that were raised in the previous discussions in the previous debate. It's just very clear that this government does not know what they're doing when it comes to immigration.